Back to My Garden, episode 15.
Welcome to Back to My Garden. Discover your passion for gardening. Here's Dave Ledoux.
Attention, serious gardeners. You've heard the old adage, you are what you eat. Well, the same goes true for your plants. Bad soil, bad results. What's the gardener's secret weapon? It's called Moo Poo Tea. What is Moo Poo Tea? You need to know at www.backtomygarden.com/moo. This episode of Back to My Garden brought to you by Coffee Royalty. Is it really possible to lose 5, 10, even 20 pounds or more just by switching your coffee or tea? Find out more at www.backtomygarden.com/coffee. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world when you listen to this. If you're hearing my voice, hi, I'm Dave Ledoux, and welcome to another edition of Back to My Garden. Great episode today. Our special guest is from Central Texas in the Austin area. She blogs about adventures in suburban sustainability. She's a mother, a writer, and an activist. She has a gorgeous blog with tremendous photography. She's active on social media, and we have a lot to talk about today. So I want to welcome to the call Alexis Waters. Alexis, welcome to Back to My Garden.
Hi, Dave. Thank you.
All right. Alexis, are you ready to dig in?
I am, always.
I want to learn a little bit about you, as do the listeners. Take a minute or two and just share with us a little bit about your background.
Well, growing up, my mom was the gardener in the family. It was something she did to get away from a house full of kids. So it wasn't something I did so much as a child, but then as I got older and started decorating apartments and homes, I'd put a little container of flowers out by the door or whatever. But recently we bought a new home, and it has a huge yard with nothing but grass on a very hot west-facing exposure, and that really kind of spurred me into what I'm doing now with the before and afters and the things on my blog, because, oh my gosh, it's a lot of grass to mow, and I really wanted to do something really positive with it, and just for myself and my family, but also for the neighbors who walk by.
Fantastic. So you're one of us. You grew up as a gardener.
Kind of. Yes. Yep. My mom convinced me to mow the yard with the riding lawnmower, saying it would give me good practice for my driving test. So I've been around power tools and shovels and stuff, definitely, since I was young enough to use them.
There used to be a cartoon show called King of the Hill.
Oh, yes.
And they love their riding mowers down in Texas.
It's true. We really do.
Now, for those of you who are driving or jogging, listening on your earbuds, keep both hands on the wheel. I'll put the show notes and links below. Make sure you check out Alexis's blog at www.beanandbee.com. That's B as in boy, E-A-N as in Nancy, A-N-D, B-E-E.com. And follow her on Twitter, very active Twitter feed, at Bean and Bee blog. And maybe let's just jump into your blog, because It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Do you have a background in photography? Is it a hobby?
I was raised, my dad is a photographer. So my parents clearly have a huge influence on this in this interview. My mom was the one in the garden. My dad was the photographer, and it just sort of osmotically got beaten into me as a child how to take photos and how to do things. But I've never had a quote unquote real camera until about a year ago. I have a Canon Rebel, and I love it. And I have different lenses, and I have a blast. My children move too quickly most of the time to get good shots. So I've turned my attention to my flowers and my grass and my trees because they don't move so fast. But my background education-wise is also in visual media. My degree is in radio, television, and film. So I did get some official training there as far as like how to set up a nice image and how to marry an image and words together. So I'm not completely untrained, but a lot of it is mostly just trial and error.
I find gardeners, either they love to eat or they love to look, and the flower people especially. Your blog is colorful. My favorite part is the before and the afters. They're dramatic, they're impactful, they're case studies because it's real life.
Yes. And that's what I was trying to show, that like, if I can do this, little old me with my crazy kids in the way and the dogs barking and, you know, so many other things that need to get done, if I can figure out how to do it, maybe that can inspire somebody else how to figure out how to do it. You know, the day we dug up all of the pathway, I think it was about 102 for the most of that day. And God bless my husband for sticking with it. And we ended up running into all kinds of things. Like we removed the bricks from the original walkway thinking it was just dirt underneath, but it was actually 4 inches of concrete. So we ended up having to go rent a jackhammer and get the concrete up. But at that point we were committed and made it happen. So now every time I walk up and down our completed walkway, which you can see pictures on my blog, and I will do a post with an update of what it looks like almost a year later, with the plants grown in. But every time I walk up and down it, I'm just so proud and so relieved that it's done. And anytime anybody compliments me on it, it's, you know, it's all the more meaningful because we did it with our own hands. And, you know, it's a big point of pride for me.
I want to pick it up right there because we have listeners who their garden is 2 or 3 pots on their patio and they live in apartments in big cities.
Uh-huh.
And so now you get a brand new backyard, a big backyard, which is a lot of people, they dream about having this blank canvas. Mm-hmm. Was it intimidating? How did you develop the vision? And did you start small or did you kind of go for it with both feet?
It was definitely intimidating because the previous owners were the only people who'd owned the house since new, 20 years. They left us instructions on how to fertilize the grass and how high to mow it and how often to water it. They loved their grass and it showed. And I do not love grass. So it was a sort of like you know, I never met them obviously, but I felt kind of almost guilty because they had clearly cared for it so well and so much. And to be like, well, you know what? Screw you. I'm ripping it out and I'm going to plant some native plants, you know, because I think your grass is wasteful. But as far as taking it chunk by chunk or jumping in, we tried to jump in. We hired somebody to come out and look at it, and we paid good money to have somebody drop a landscape design in on. And we started looking at it and like, this doesn't meet our needs. We don't want to spend our money on this. We want this to be a reflection of us. We want this to be a learning experience for us. So we pulled back and then we decided to go with the slow and steady chunking progress, which is interesting because about the same time I learned about permaculture, which is a sort of gardening, living philosophy, where you're looking at the whole system rather than just a piece. And one of their little slogans is slow, steady, small solutions. So I've really taken that to heart, and it's helped me not be so intimidated with our large space. And it's helped me not beat myself up when I don't get to do things as quickly as I'd like to.
Mm. Yeah, you don't meet too many impatient gardeners, do you? They have skinny tomatoes. What was your soil like? Because you had lawn. Did you have to bring in a truckload or something?
That just wasn't in the budget. So what we did was we did add in a little bit of compost and fertilizer, but the soil was sad. I mean, it was really compacted. There were no earthworms. There were just grubs and these long, skinny, oily-looking little wormy beetle things. I don't even know what they are. I didn't even bother to look it up because I was disgusted by them by the end of the project. I was like, I never want to see one of those gross things again. So I used the leftover dirt from digging up the walkway to build up the side bed. And at that point it was really loosened, from all the digging and jackhammering, and I amended it with some compost, but then, you know, that's really all we kind of had planned on budget wise. We didn't realize quite how bad the soil was. So then I just went to town. I planted what I wanted in it, deeply mulched it. And then again, when our super cold winter hit this year, I added another couple of inches of mulch a few months later and just left it alone. And this spring, when I went to, kind of do my spring cleanup and put in some new plants, I was completely blown away by how much better it was already with just that little bit of help. I mean, there were actually worms in it instead of just grubs. So I took that as a really positive sign. Nice.
I want to make sure today we talk a little bit about your activism, because you live in one of the driest parts of the country right now, don't you?
Yes, and it's kind of ironic because we've actually had a little bit of rain today, but just enough to make it unbearably humid, not enough to actually water anything. But yes, we are highly dependent on rain here for our water. All of our water comes from the Highland Lakes or from the Edwards Aquifer. So if they don't get replenished, that's it. We don't have water. We have to find it from somewhere else or buy it, I suppose.
And so the message what's the conversation like? So you have young kids and families, and is it awareness? What's the conversation?
Like with my children or with people?
When you're talking with grown-ups.
Okay, so when I'm talking with grown-ups, right. It's just about drawing people's attention because I think a lot of people don't realize. Hold on one second.
Oh, that's fine. Puppy.
No bark. You're okay.
He wants to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, and that's the little one. She's like not even scary. Okay. Talking to grown-ups about drought. I like to bring people's awareness to that we are one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, but our water doesn't grow along with the population. What we have is what we have. And Austin is really known for, being able to go out on the lake and go water skiing or on the boat and go fishing. And there's a lot of outdoor activities to do here, but I think sometimes people don't realize the world is not just your playground, it's also your responsibility. So when I talk to people, I always try to keep it fun and informative. But I always, I try to bring up like, hey, this needs to be protected. And if you enjoy this, maybe you'll take 5 minutes to call your congressperson or your representative and say, hey, by the way, let's not do fracking so much. And let's not, pass laws that allow businesses to waste water or something like that. I try to bring that up, and I write a little gardening article for our community newsletter. So I always try to tie in ways that like we can make our yards more water efficient, and like building rain barrels or using drip irrigation instead of spray irrigation, because it's a real big issue here.
Wow, those are excellent examples off the top of your head.
Thanks.
It's all linked. It's all the CEO of Levi, the jeans company.
Yes, I know where you're going with this.
It's blown up on social media. He says, stop washing your blue jeans.
Yes. And as a mother of 2 little boys, I wish I had that luxury, but sometimes my pants are just gross at the end of the day. Yeah. But yes, there are things you can do like that. Skip a wash if you want, if you're comfortable with it. Or, don't water your yard 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're by law only allowed to water once a week, and some communities can only water every 2 weeks. So actually listen and don't try to be sneaky and water your lawn at midnight when nobody's watching.
Yeah, you see all the elderly European guys out at 1 a.m, and they have the secret club where they all have secret poison to kill the weeds and.
Nice. See, people here are just belligerent. They just stand in their yard and do it because you can't run your sprinklers, but you can water with a handheld hose. So they will stand out in, 95-degree heat for hours with their hose, just pouring gallons and gallons of water on this crop we can't even eat, So it's good to know that it's everywhere.
What I really appreciate about social media, and podcasts fall right in that, it's just a way of sharing the conversation. When I was a kid, there was no such thing as peanut allergies. Mm-hmm. There was no, now there's letters in the kids can't bring peanuts to school.
Right. And wheat.
There was no asthma. There was 1 kid in my school with asthma. Now kids have asthma. And I think it's all related to what we eat and what we put on our crops and.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a big study coming out now that is showing some possible relation between Roundup, the glyphosate used in Roundup. The increase of that in our foods corresponds very neatly with the increase of people with gluten intolerance and celiac disease. So, if something's strong enough to kill pretty much anything it touches, and then we eat some of it, it shouldn't be surprising that it's going to do something to our body.
Well, let me throw a curveball at you. Okay. Because some people garden, I think, just for to grow food, and some because they love flowers, and some people get physical exercise, and some it's almost like therapy. Mm-hmm. What is gardening like for you? What do you love most about it?
Oh, it's definitely the therapy. I'm definitely a therapeutic gardener. Sometimes you just need to go and move some heavy stuff around and blow off some steam. And sometimes you need to go because you can't do anything about the horrible stories on the news or, what you're facing at home or what future you think your children might have to grow up in. But you can go and you can plant some native plants for your pollinators in the neighborhood, or you can go and build a rain barrel and be like, well, we may have a water shortage here, but I'm doing my tiny, tiny part. I can't control what's going on outside of my yard, but I can control what I do in my garden. So for me, that's definitely why I've gotten very passionate about it, because it is one of the few things I do have the ability to make a difference in.
My wife was out in the garden this morning, and her hands were moving, and it looked odd. So I said, "What are you doing?" And she had her camera phone trying to take a picture of a bumblebee on her tomato plant flower. And I wanted to ask you, both your Twitter handle and your blog have bee in it. Is that by coincidence or design?
Actually, they're my kids' nicknames.
Ah.
Yeah, my older son, his name is Ben, and his cousin couldn't say Ben. He called him Bean. And so we all started calling him Bean. So he's our Butterbean. And then when my second child was born, he never cried. He kind of just grumbled and grunted. So we started calling him the Grumbly Bumblebee. Just as a family kind of joke. So then when I started thinking about writing again and starting a blog again and stuff, I was like, well, really everything I do is for my kids, and I want them to learn from what I'm learning. So it just seemed really appropriate to use their nicknames.
Dynamite. Very good backstory. Nice. Check it. And now they're beanandbee.com. It makes total sense.
Yes.
Let's talk about your garden this season. What are you growing? What's responding well, and what is frustrating you?
Okay, well, in my front yard, I am growing lots of herbs and roses and blackberries and some really bitter lettuce that's going to seed right now, which is kind of neat looking. It adds to the cottage garden atmosphere, but it definitely is not edible. And then in my back, I have a Keyhole Garden that I am growing some tomatoes and cucumbers and lots of peppers, but and melons and watermelons and cantaloupes. And what's frustrating me right now so much is I cannot get any of my melons to set fruit. I've tried hand pollinating. I've tried extra water, extra fertilizer. I don't know if it's too hot or if I started them too early. I'm really new to vegetable gardening. This is really my first year trying it on any sort of large scale. Mostly I've always grown native plants and roses. So I am definitely trying to climb up that learning curve. But what's been going well, our yellow pear tomatoes are ridiculous. They are going up to the top of the dome over my Keyhole Garden, and we get a handful of those every day. And my basil is doing really well. All the herbs really kind of love the heat and the poor soil, so I've got lots of that, and they do really well.
I want you to, in a moment, explain Keyhole, because we have Europeans and some people in Asia listening. And, one of them said, I'm growing aubergines and courgettes. And I go, what's an aubergine and courgette? And they go, well, it's an
eggplant and squash?
Keyhole Garden. Explain it to some of our listeners.
Okay, so the Keyhole Garden was, from my understanding, first used in Africa as a way to kind of biointensively garden in a very dry region, which in Texas, we've got a lot of the similar issues with the water and the heat. So it just seemed very clever to me. And basically what it is a circular raised bed. Kind of, if you think of it, if you're looking down from the top like a donut, and rather than the center of the donut being a hole, it is a compost basket. So then you build up dirt around the sides of the compost basket. And in the middle is like a pie slice cut out. So I hope our friends in other countries understand donut and
Sure.
pie.
Yeah.
A triangle-shaped wedge is cut out so you can get to the middle and access that compost basket. So what you do is you fill the bottom of it. It's about 2.5, 3 feet tall. You fill it with basically compostable junk. I mean, like cardboard, branches, whatever you kind of have on hand, half-baked compost, dead leaves, all of that stuff. So that builds the bulk of it, because getting that much good soil would be incredibly expensive and difficult. And then the top, I think you did about 4 inches in mine. The top 4 inches is then a mix of like compost, finished compost, topsoil, and whatever other amendments you want to add. And so you plant into that, and as your plants grow, you water only into that compost basket. So their roots grow towards that compost basket to get the nutrients in the water. Then while underneath all of the cardboard and branches and everything you put on the bottom, as it rots, it acts as a sponge to hold that water in. So you're basically growing all of your vegetables in a big soggy compost heap. But it works really well. I almost never water mine, even in July.
Amazing. Fantastic. Oh, and your roses. Do you know about the rose secret weapon, Moo Poo tea?
I have come in contact with Moo Poo tea on Twitter, but I have yet to actually use their product.
Yeah.
My rose secret weapon is banana peels. And I grow really hardy, like antiques and knockouts. I don't grow any fastidious supermodel kind of roses. I like mine to be a little tough, but I'm definitely going to have to try that stuff out, because I see people raving about it all the time. I just haven't gotten around to putting in an order.
Well, for those of you listening, I'm going to have to get her as a sponsor. Annie Haven. She has a product called Moo Poo tea, and it's exactly like it sounds. And it's basically allows you to create it's the secret weapon for rose and orchid. And check her out at Twitter at Green Soil. She'll like the plug. I'll put her in the show notes as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Oh, I have to ask you.
Uh-huh.
You're doing great. Everything's growing. But the listeners seem to relate to what I call catastrophic oopsie moments. Have you ever tried something in the garden that just was a disaster? And can you do it in a humorous story?
Would you guys like to hear about my vermin?
Everyone loves good vermin stories.
Everyone loves a good vermin story. So, as I mentioned, this is our first really large gardening space, and the first time I've ever had room for a sizable compost bin. So my sweet, loving husband built me this beautiful cedar compost bin with, slats for airing and a lid to keep the rain out, and it's just great. And so really excited, and we put it in the back corner of our yard, kind of out of the way. And went to town, putting our kitchen scraps in it and our leaves and all that good stuff. And then come spring, which here is like February, I was out cleaning up in that little, sort of the back of the house part of the yard, as we had some, broken concrete and some bags of leaves in the compost bin. And it's just kind of going through and organizing and stuff, and moving some rocks around. And I start to notice that there's like this trail of kind of vegetable scraps coming from the compost bin into the rock pile. And I'm like, well, that's totally weird. So being, the brave frontier woman that I am, I start picking through the rocks, and I see this long, white, skinny, tapery thing sticking out, and I'm like, oh my god, it's the longest rat tail I've ever seen. Oh my god. So I put my gloves on, and I get my bravery up, and I reach down, and I grab it, and I pull it, and it's just a turnip root. It was just like the root of a turnip. So I was like, oh, okay, it's just a vegetable, no big deal. All right, I can handle a turnip root. Threw it back in the compost, moving rocks. And then something moved. Something big and brown moved. And I was like, so then I started screaming for real, like just horror film, like girly girl, screaming. And so my husband comes out to go see what's going on. But at that point, I'd grabbed the hose and I started spraying towards the fuzzy thing that was moving in the rock pile. And the largest rat I have ever seen in my life. I mean, without exaggeration, I think this thing weighed like 5 pounds because it'd been doing nothing all winter but eating out of my compost bin and walking a foot over to the rock pile. Like it was a morbidly obese rat. And it ran up the fence post, down all along our fence, and then went down into our neighbor's yard. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. We've been harboring a morbidly obese rat all winter, and now it's our neighbor's problem. So fortunately, we don't know those neighbors. And they never came over to complain, so I'm hoping somebody's cat got the rat. But yeah, we learned our lesson not to put a food source and a shelter so close together in the yard, because I'm all about attracting beneficial creatures to the yard, but I don't see anything beneficial about an obese rat.
Oh, fantastic story. I just picture him like in a white tank top with stains, and he's all grouchy and scratching his belly. And
totally. Yeah, he was nasty.
The turnip root setup with the comic relief paws, that's straight out of a horror movie.
Really? Well, and I wish I was making it up, but I was like, yeah, it was
fantastic.
It was gross.
So the takeaway is to keep them separate, right?
Yeah, if you don't want to attract vermin, don't put a food source like your compost bin and some delightful shelter, like a nice, dry, warm pile of rocks next to it. Because, yeah, it was just the perfect setup for him. And now we've moved our compost, we've diminished the rock pile, and we have 2 dogs now, so they help with the scaring away of larger critters.
You know, Alexis, our half hour is rapidly moving away from us, and it's the point in the show where we get to play what I call 5 quick questions.
All right.
And this is your chance to drop some wisdom and experience and share some resources. Are you ready to play?
I am.
Question number 1. In your opinion, what do you think stops most people from gardening?
My opinion about what stops most people from gardening is twofold. First, I think it's time, because it does take time. You have to choose to get out of your house. You have to choose to turn off the TV. And it's not an area that most people feel so inclined towards, like easily comfortable in, particularly when you live in an area that has challenging weather. But then I also think part of that also is fear, because we're told failure is bad and that, you know, you don't want to waste your time. And gardening sometimes can feel like a waste of time when your melons aren't setting fruit or when you're growing more rats than flowers. But I think it's worth taking a second to try to overcome those things.
Fantastic. Oh, and your melon situation here. My wife was out in the garden this morning, and I go, what are you doing? She's putting Epsom salts around the tomato and peppers.
Oh, yeah?
And she says it helps set the fruit earlier if it's all flowers and no fruit.
Really? I'm going to have to try that, because I have Epsom salts, and I've never done that one yet.
Do a little Googling and see if it applies to melons, but...
Yeah, no, that would be awesome, because, yeah, that's been my biggest challenge with a lot of my things. And eventually they do, but the melons haven't.
I'm a big watermelon fan, so hope they work out this season for you.
Thank you.
Question number 2. What is the best gardening advice that you've ever received?
I don't know if this is so much advice, but it's a little quote. I actually saw it on Pinterest, some gardening board on Pinterest that I keep coming back to. And it says, it was along the lines of, a weed is just a plant whose virtues have yet to be discovered. And I just love that. Like, I think it, you know, you can kind of apply it to a lot of things, like, you know, your relationships with other people and your frustrations in life, is that, you know, it's not really a weed. You just haven't figured out what it's good for yet. Fantastic.
I almost had a moment right there. That was good.
Wisdom from Pinterest.
Question 3. If you had just 2 websites to share with a beginning gardener, what would those websites be?
My favorite blog obviously other than my own, is northwestediblelife.com. And the woman who writes it, her name is Erica. I don't know her personally, but I love her writing style. She's full of helpful information, even though she gardens in a wildly different zone than I do. She's up near Seattle. So I think that's like zone 4, maybe. But she's just full of really good advice. She's really down to earth. She's also a parent. So I kind of connect with her stories about children as well. But she's just a really great read. And she used to be a chef, so she has wonderful recipes, plus cocktail recipes, which you can't go wrong with. Mm-hmm. And then my second website I enjoy poking around on is permies.com. It's Permies. It's a forum for people interested in permaculture. And I mostly lurk because I don't feel like I have as much knowledge as some of the people on there. So I'm not sure always how to contribute, but there is a lot of great information on there. A lot of people doing some really grand experiments with gardening and living. And it's just fascinating what people are doing and how it's going.
Fantastic. Northwestediblelife.com and permies.com.
Yes.
I heard the term gartending.
Gartending?
Where you take your garden and you intersect it with bartending.
Nice.
Some of the best cocktail recipes I've seen are Shauna Coronado's blog.
Oh, really?
And she's amazing on social media, ShaunaCoronado.com.
I know her from Twitter, but I've never actually read her blog. I'll have to look into that.
She's a martini queen.
Really? I love gartending. I love that word. I'm going to have to do some more research. My husband's a mixologist in the house, so I'll have to pass it along to him.
Excellent. Number 4. What's the best gardening book you can recommend for a beginner?
I really enjoyed Gardening for Geeks, and unfortunately I don't have the author's name in front of me, but it's sort of a condensation of a lot of permaculture theory and process, which can get really technical and overwhelming, I think, to new gardeners and people that just kind of want somebody to lay out the steps for them. But Gardening for Geeks boils it all down. Beautiful pictures, beautiful like infographics and stuff to kind of help you get started. And it explains all the theory behind why you do what you do in a garden, like why you need to have pollinators and why it's okay if you have aphids as long as the ladybugs come. It explains sort of how all of that works in a really digestible, not too overwhelming way.
Nice. And number 5, what's the number one thing that every gardener should try to grow or experiment with next year?
I would say milkweed, because it is the only plant that is the larval host for monarch butterflies, which I don't know if you know, but their numbers have been decreasing rapidly from year to year, and part of it is because of loss of habitat. So if everybody could just plant a couple of milkweeds, I think it would go a long way to help those monarchs boost their population numbers.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Good answer.
Thanks.
And that's in the fall, isn't it?
Yes. So this is the perfect time to plan for that little spot in your yard that can be your milkweed garden. And then once the monarchs discover it and lay their eggs, you can have the fun of watching your caterpillars grow into butterflies. We actually bought a monarch caterpillar on a milkweed plant as a fundraiser for my son's school. His preschool did it. And it was so fun to have a little caterpillar in our house. And watch it transform and go through the stages of being a chrysalis. And my 4-year-old was going around telling people that his favorite instar was the first instar when the caterpillar was really tiny. So it was a great experience, just all around.
You know, I've been keeping these podcasts on a half hour because that's the average commute time, and a lot of people like to listen to podcasts in the car. Mm-hmm. It's nowhere near enough time. You and I could have talked for another 2 hours.
Well, if you ever need a repeat guest, I'd be happy to come back.
Awesome. Yeah, we just scratched the surface. I want to learn more about your activism in permaculture. Make sure, everybody, if you're listening along, I'm going to put the links in the show notes. Head over to Alexis's blog at www.beanandbee.com. Follow her on Twitter and retweet her photos at beanandbeeblog. Our time has nearly escaped us, but I'm going to give you the last word today.
Oh, no.
Can you leave our listeners, Alexis, with either a note of encouragement or a pearl of wisdom?
Oh, goodness. Let me see. I'm really on the spot. I think I prepared for everything but this. I would say that it's okay to fail. I'm giving you permission to fail in your garden. Don't expect perfection. When I started this, I was like, okay, in 1 year, Better Homes and Gardens and Martha Stewart are going to be banging down my door to photograph my amazing edible cottage garden. And nature has a way of setting you back and putting you in your place. So don't be afraid to fail. Just get out there and try and make your discoveries, and you're gonna have fun. You will, one way or another, rats and all.
You've been just wonderful. Awesome. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was fun.
All of the website links and resources mentioned on this episode can be found at backtomygarden.com/15.